Hare Krishna. Reading from Srimad Bhagavad Gita, Chapter 3, verse number 41. Chapter 3 Karma Yoga. Tasmat tvam indriyani adau niyamya bharatarshapha papmanam prajahihenam jnana vijnana nashanam. तस्मात् त्वमिन्द्रियाण्यादौ नियम्य भरतर्षभा पापमानं प्रजाह्येनं ज्ञानविज्ञाननाशनम् तस्मात् त्वमिन्द्रियाण्यादौ नियम्य भरतर्षभा पापमानं प्रजाह्येनं ज्ञान विज्ञान नाशनम. Tasma, therefore, tvam, you, indriyani, senses, ado, in the beginning, niyamya, by regulating, bhartarshabha, O chief amongst the descendants of Bharata, papamanam, the great symbol of sin, prajahi, curb, he, certainly, enam, this, jnana, of knowledge, Vijnana and scientific knowledge of the pure soul, Nashanam, the destroyer. Therefore, O Arjuna, best of the Bharatas, in the very beginning curb this great symbol of sin, lust, by regulating the senses and slay this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Purport. The Lord advised Arjuna to regulate the senses from the very beginning so that he could curb the greatest sinful enemy, lust, which destroys the urge for self-realization and specific knowledge of the self. Jnana refers to knowledge of self as distinguished from non-self, or in other words, knowledge that the spirit soul is not the body. Vijnana refers to specific knowledge of the spirit soul's constitutional position and his relationship to the Supreme Soul. It is explained thus in the Srimad Bhagavatam 2.9.31. Jnanam param guhyam me yad vijnana samanvitam sarahasyam tadangam cha grihana gaditam maya. The knowledge of the Self and the Supreme Self is very confidential and mysterious, but such knowledge and specific realization can be understood if explained with their various aspects by the Lord Himself. Bhagavad Gita gives us that general and specific knowledge of the Self. The living entities are parts and parcel of the Lord, and therefore they are simply meant to serve the Lord. This consciousness is called Krishna consciousness, and thereby one may become fully Krishna conscious and act accordingly. Lust is only the perverted reflection of the love of God, which is natural for every living entity. But if one is educated in Krishna consciousness from the very beginning, that natural love of God cannot deteriorate into lust. When love of God deteriorates into lust, it is very difficult to return to the normal position. Nonetheless, Krishna consciousness is so powerful that even a late beginner can become a lover of God by following the regulative principles of devotional service. So, from any stage of life or from the time of understanding its urgency, one can begin regulating the senses in Krishna consciousness, devotional service of the Lord, and turn the lust into love of Godhead, the highest perfectional stage of human life. So, from any stage of life or from the time of understanding its urgency, one can begin regulating the senses in Krishna consciousness. So, in this verse, Lord Shri Krishna is telling Arjuna that in the very beginning curb this great symbol of sin by regulating the senses and slay this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. So since the verse number 31, sorry, not 31, sorry, 37, 36, 37, we now are, Lord Shri Krishna is and Arjuna, they're discussing. In fact, Lord Shri Krishna is instructing Arjuna about this lust, that this is which is born with of the contact with the material mode of passion and later transformed into wrath. It is the greatest sinful enemy of this world, because from lust comes anger. Anger, from anger comes illusion, and once illusion comes, then memory is, intelligence is bewildered. Then there are different degrees of lust in verse number 38, like fire covered by smoke, mirror covered by dust, and embryo covered by the womb. So these are different degrees of lust by which an individual living entity is covered. Now, the living entity's characteristics of lust is that it covers the consciousness of the individual living entity, and it is never satisfied and burns like fire. The more we try to feed it, the more strongly it blazes. The senses, then we know the strategic positions occupied by lust. Strategic positions captured by lust. Now next step is how to counter this enemy. So Lord Shri Krishna is saying, in the very beginning, curb this. And how to curb this? By regulating the senses. In the very beginning, curb it. Very beginning, curb it by regulating the senses. So sense regulation is the key, and it must be performed. And what it does, this lust, it destroys knowledge and self-realization. Slay this destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. Knowledge, self-realization. Both are destroyed by lust. So if we even give our senses a little bit leeway, they can cause havoc. Jnana means knowledge of self. And Vijnana means knowledge of spirit, soul's constitution, position, and his relationship to the Supreme Lord. That is known as Vijnana. So even a realized person can be his knowledge also and his self-realization can be destroyed if the senses are not regulated. So it is very important to regulate the senses. Prabhupada is saying that from the very beginning of life, one has to learn this Krishna consciousness, and thereby one may become fully Krishna conscious and act according. So the solution is control the senses, regulate the senses. How do we regulate the senses? We regulate the senses by following the various regulations prescribed in the scriptures. But while, as told in the previous verse number 34, that the principles to regulate attachment and aversion pertaining to senses and their object, but one should not come under control of such attachment and aversion, because these attachment and aversions are stumbling blocks to the path of self-realization. So we have Vedic principles to regulate attachment and aversion towards various sense objects. For regulating the senses, we should follow those principles, but again we should not be attached to those principles, or we should not be attached to sense gratification within that principles. For example, sex is permitted in householder life, so one should not enter the householder life with a desire to enjoy sex life. No, the desire should be practicing Krishna consciousness. Satisfying sexual desires is a material necessity because of this body. So there is a provision that for whom it is very difficult to control this sexual urge, enter grahastha life, and then you dovetail your propensities and energy into Krishna consciousness. The focus should still remain Krishna consciousness. Goal of life should remain to practice Krishna consciousness. It should not be the other way around. When we cook food, we must offer everything to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and only after that we should take prasad. Now that does not mean that we cook all the palatable foodstuffs which we like and offer it and take it after offering it to Lord. So there is a distinguish between these two. One thing is doing everything for the pleasure of the Lord. Other thing is doing everything for our pleasure, but through the Lord. In the beginning stages, it is okay that we may do some things for our pleasure and we keep the Lord in center picture. So in the beginning, initial stages, to some degree it is permissible, but it should not become the only route. It should not be that Krishna is in picture. Krishna should be the center of the picture of our life. Their pleasure of their lordships should be the center. So we must offer everything to their lordships, yes. At the same time, we must follow the principles for attachment and aversion, Vedic principles, like eating 3 times a day and only after offering it to the Lord, and not eating anything in between the meals, eating only Krishna Prasad without onion and garlic, no intoxications. So this should be done like this, but we should not be attached to those principles. We should not be also become like too much focused on the principles, like no, it has to be done in this way only, this is the only thing. We should understand the essence, the goal is to become Krishna conscious, not become rule conscious. Because if we become rule conscious and then Krishna, the service to Lord is not the center, then also we go astray. It's like when we are singing Kirtan, our focus should be singing holy name. And for it to be, for others to be receptive of it, being appreciative of it, we should sing it in a melodious way, melodious tune, in rhythm, in proper sur. But the goal should not be that we should sing a nice tune or we should become an expert in music. Now, that is not the goal. An expert in music, there have been various experts in music, and it is a good thing. It takes person to the level of goodness, but they are not Krishna conscious. They sing bhajans also, but they are not Krishna conscious. So our focus of our life shouldn't be the activity. The focus of our life should be why we are doing it. That should be like Srila Prabhupada gives example that when a mother is cooking or doing something, she is thinking of her child. This is, if I give this food to my child, it will be healthy. If I cook this for my child, it will be healthy for him. If I do this thing, then it will be good for my child. I can purchase these clothes for my child. So, but focus is not purchasing clothes. Focus is not cooking food stuff. Focus is taking care of child. So this is what we have to distinguish in our day-to-day life. Regulating the senses, yes, but not the focus is not just regulating the senses, but why we are regulating it and how we are regulating it. Just mere restricting the senses. No, I won't do this. No, I won't do this. No, I won't do this. No, this thing, it will work for some time. It will work. If one has sufficient determination, one can go on. But will it bring us closer to Krishna or it will take us far from Krishna, away from Krishna? That is the criteria we should have. Regulating the senses in Krishna consciousness will take us closer to Krishna. Just regulating the senses, it doesn't fulfill any purpose as such. For the time being, we may be moralist, we may be saying no to the demands of sense gratification. But if you do not have a higher engagement, if the senses are not engaged in something higher, then it's just a matter of time that they will go all out in the indulgement of sense gratification. So, by regulating the senses, we slay the destroyer of knowledge and self-realization. We curb this lust by regulating the senses. By regulating the senses in Krishna consciousness, that's what Prabhupada mentions here in the concluding verses. So, and Prabhupada, in fact, he is telling from this beginning in itself that from the very beginning of life, one has to learn this Krishna consciousness, and thereby one may become fully Krishna conscious and act accordingly. So, we are very grateful to Srila Prabhupada in this regard, that had he not given this purport, had he not explained the scriptures with the point of view of Krishna consciousness, Bhagavad Gita would have remained a mere nice idea. Okay, it is a nice book, it has nice ideas, but without practical application. What Srila Prabhupada has given us, what the Acharyas has given us, is how the guide, how to practically apply it in our lives, in our day-to-day lives, in the lives of we, the common person, who cannot go to forest or cannot leave his family and become a brahmachari or a sannyasi or things like that. We, the common mass, who every day has to go to office, who every day has to work, he has to cook food, take care of kids, take care of family. For us, this Bhagavad Gita has been presented. This Krishna conscious method, process is for us, for me, for you maybe, yes, for everyone. But it's for us, for individual upliftment, individual application. So, by practicing Krishna consciousness, focusing on the process of Krishna consciousness, and in that, while practicing Krishna consciousness, we also learn how to regulate our senses gradually, step by step, process by process. And that's how we can turn the lust into love of Godhead. Thank you so much. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. Srimad Bhagavad Gita ki Jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.